This short video talks about how to change a fraction into a decimal. So when we think about decimal place value, we can see that the first place value after the decimal point is the tenths. And remember that THS signals that it is a decimal, right? Not the tens place, but the tenths. And the second place value after the decimal point is the hundredths, THS, signaling that it is a decimal, not the whole number place value, hundreds. So pay careful attention to that when you're thinking about decimals, tenths and hundredths. So if I had the fraction 4/5, we want to use what we know about fractions to help us write it as a decimal. So we know how to write equivalent fractions. We did that all last unit. And so in order to turn this into a decimal, let's use what we know about decimal place value. We know that decimals have a denominator of 10 or 100. So looking at 4/5, could we make an equivalent fraction using 10 as a denominator or 100 as a denominator? And the answer is yes, we can. So 10, let's use 10 as our denominator. And so what did we get? How did we get from 5 to 10? What did we multiply 5 by to get to 10? We multiplied 5 by 2. So whatever we do to the denominator, we have to do to the numerator. So 4 times 2 is 8. So our equivalent fraction to 4/5 would be 8/10. And now we can use what we know about our decimal place value to write 8/10 the fraction as 8/10 the decimal. And so in the tenths place would be an 8. So to write it as a decimal, we would just write 0.8. Let's try another one. Okay, so if we had let's do 3/20. So I need to make an equivalent fraction with either a denominator of 10 or 100. In this case, I'm going to use 100. And so I have to ask myself, 20 times what gives me 100? Well, I know 20 times 5 equals 100. So to make an equivalent fraction, I need to multiply the denominator and the numerator by the same thing. So 3 times 5 is 15. So the equivalent fraction to 3/20 would be 15 hundredths. And now we just use what we know about decimal place value to write that as a decimal. So that would be 0.15. Okay, let's do a fun one now. Let's say we have an improper fraction, okay? So let's say we have 8/5. So again, to write an equivalent fraction, we either need to use a denominator of 10 or 100. I know 10 is going to be the easiest one to use, so I'm going to use 10. So I ask myself, 5 times what equals 10? I know it's 2, so I multiply the denominator by 2 and the numerator by 2, and I get 16/10. Now I can write this as a decimal. Now this is an improper fraction. The numerator is greater than the denominator, so I know I'm going to have a whole and then part of a whole, right? This number is greater than 1. So we could say 16 divided by 10, right? This is just a division problem. 16 divided by 10. 10 goes into 16 once with 6 left over. So the leftover part becomes our numerator and the divisor becomes our denominator. So we have the mixed number now of 1 and 6/10. Remember in math, anytime you hear that word and, it is signaling a decimal, isn't it? So 1 and 6/10. So to write it as a decimal, 1.6 or 1 and 6/10.